Welcome to Mr. Phantom, where fear hides in every shadow and chilling tales come to life. Before we start, make sure to subscribe and like this video to get a scary story every night. As you settle into a comfortable place, take a deep breath and allow your body to relax. Let the weight of the day slip away as you find a moment of stillness. Close your eyes and let the quiet surround you, letting the soothing calm of the night guide you into a peaceful space. Tonight, we'll journey into a world where the line between reality and the unknown blurs, where fear and curiosity meet in the darkness. But don't worry, you're safe here. Just let go of any tension, breathe slowly, and let the story unfold at its own pace. As you listen, let your mind wander, and let the mystery of the tale carry you. The journey ahead is one of suspense, but there's no need to rush. All you have to do is relax, and let the story take you where it needs to go. So, find your comfort, settle in, and let's begin this tale together. You're in the right place, ready to drift into a world of mystery and quiet reflection. Let's start the story. I never wanted to move back to Vermont. After my parents passed away, the house they left behind was nothing but a weight I couldn't bear to carry. It was huge, old, and filled with too many memories that could never be erased. But life had other plans. With nowhere else to go and no real reason to stay in the city, I found myself standing in front of that house again. The house that used to smell like my mother's cooking and my father's cologne now only smelled of dust, mold, and something colder. It was an old Victorian, built in the late 1800s. The wood was dark, the windows tall and narrow, and the front porch sagged under its own weight. The garden was overgrown, vines creeping over the old stone path that led to the front door. The grass had grown wild, and the trees had grown so tall and thick that they blocked out the sunlight, casting the house in an eternal twilight. The house had always felt eerie, even when I was a child. My friends used to say it was haunted, but I never believed them. I thought it was just the age of the house, the creaks, the groans, the odd drafts. But now, as an adult, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with it. Something was off. When I arrived, the house was empty. All the furniture had been cleared out years ago, leaving only shadows and cold rooms. My parents' belongings were long gone, donated or sold after they died. I had no choice but to start over, unpacking the remnants of my own life in this decaying shell of a place. It felt like trying to fit a modern puzzle piece into an ancient frame, an impossible task. I spent the first few days cleaning. I scrubbed the dust off every surface, swept away the cobwebs, and tried to make the place feel like home again. But it was hard. The house never seemed to be fully clean. No matter how many times I wiped down the counters or vacuumed the rugs, there was always an odd sense of neglect. It wasn't just the house, though. It was everything around it. The silence, the air. It felt like I was the last living soul in a forgotten corner of the world. There was one thing that made it even worse, Mr. Luther. Mr. Luther lived next door. Or rather, I should say, he had lived next door for as long as I could remember. I didn't know much about him. He was an old man, probably in his late 70s, with wild, unkempt hair and a hunched back. He had a strange way of always staring, never saying much but always watching. It wasn't until I moved in that I realized just how much he watched. The first night I spent in the house, I went to bed early, exhausted from unpacking. I lay in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling, the old floorboards creaking with the wind outside. I tried to ignore the odd sense of unease crawling up my spine, telling myself it was just the house settling. But then I heard it. A tap. A soft tap on the window, like a knuckle gently knocking against glass. My body froze, my heart skipping a beat. I told myself it was just the wind, maybe a branch scraping against the glass. I tried to dismiss it, to go back to sleep, but the tap came again. This time louder, more insistent. I sat up in bed, staring at the window. The curtains were drawn, but the moonlight cast a faint glow around the edges. I could see the outline of the trees outside, swaying in the wind, but nothing else. Nothing, except for the shadow of a figure standing just beyond the edge of the yard. It was Mr. Luther. He was standing at the edge of his property, staring directly at my window. I could see him clearly, even in the dim light. His face was expressionless, his eyes dark and hollow, but there was something unsettling about the way he stood there. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He just watched. I felt a chill run through me, a feeling that I couldn't shake. My mind raced. Was I imagining things? Was I just tired? But as I stared back at him, I realized he was still there. I quickly drew the curtains shut, heart pounding in my chest. I tried to shake it off, to convince myself it was just the overactive imagination of someone who had been cooped up in a house alone for too long. But I couldn't. The image of Mr. Luther standing there, watching me, burned into my mind like a scar. The next day, I went outside to check the yard. There were no footprints, no sign that anyone had been near the window. But the air felt thicker, heavier, like something had happened that I couldn't explain. Mr. Luther's house was still, silent, his windows dark, his front door shut tight. Days passed. I tried to avoid Mr. Luther as much as possible. I'd see him from time to time, standing in his yard, always watching. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was keeping track of me. There was something strange about him, something that set my nerves on edge. He never came over to say hello, never introduced himself. He'd just stare, silently, as if waiting for something. I'd see him occasionally standing by the fence, leaning on his cane, his eyes following my every movement. I tried not to acknowledge him, but every time I looked over, I could feel his eyes on me, burning a hole in my back. The nights grew longer, and the silence of the house grew louder. The old floorboards creaked underfoot, and the wind howled through the gaps in the windows. Every sound in the house seemed amplified. The wind rattled the window panes, the house groaned under its weight, and the eerie quietness wrapped itself around me like a suffocating blanket. It felt like the house was trying to speak to me, whispering its secrets, but I couldn't make out what it was saying. The following week, the feeling of being watched intensified. I tried to go about my daily routines, doing simple tasks, cooking, cleaning, unpacking boxes, but there was a growing sense that something was wrong. I couldn't pinpoint it. I couldn't explain it. But every corner of the house seemed to hold a secret. Every creak of the floor seemed to echo in the empty rooms, as if the house itself was trying to communicate with me. One evening, as the sun began to set, I stepped outside to get some air. The sky was painted in hues of orange and pink, the air still warm from the afternoon sun. But as I breathed in the cool evening breeze, I saw him again. Mr. Luther was standing at his window, watching me. His face was pressed against the glass, his eyes unblinking, his lips barely moving, as if he were whispering something to himself. I felt a jolt of fear shoot through me. Why was he always watching? What did he want? I turned away quickly, retreating back into the house. I locked the door behind me, and for the first time, I felt truly alone. It wasn't until later that night, after I'd turned off the lights and tried to sleep, that I heard it. The faintest sound, like a tap. A soft, steady tap on the window. I knew it wasn't the wind. I knew who it was. It was Mr. Luther. The tap on the window that night wasn't the first time I'd heard something in the house that didn't belong. At first, I tried to brush it off as the house settling. After all, it was old, and old houses creaked and groaned. But deep down, I knew that something was off, and that something wasn't just the house. It was him, Mr. Luther. His eyes, the way he always seemed to be watching me, his presence that lingered in the back of my mind. I couldn't get rid of the feeling that something darker was unfolding here, something I wasn't meant to understand. The next morning, the sun barely made it over the horizon before I found myself standing at the kitchen window, staring out into the yard. Mr. Luther's house was still there, just across the fence, its dark windows staring back at me. I hadn't seen him that morning, but I didn't need to. I knew he was watching. He was always watching. The tapping on my window the previous night had shaken me. I hadn't dared open the curtains, but I could feel his gaze like a weight pressing against me. I'd slept fitfully, barely closing my eyes for fear that when I opened them, he would be standing there again, his face just inches from mine. But even with the light of day spilling through the house, I couldn't shake that feeling of being watched. I tried to go about my day. I made a weak attempt to unpack more boxes, to make the house feel more like home, but everything seemed so much heavier, as if the air itself had thickened. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to be darker, deeper, and no matter how much light I switched on, I could still feel them lurking. The house groaned and whispered in the silence, as though it had a life of its own. But the most unsettling thing of all was the sense that I wasn't alone. I had been living alone for months now, but this house, it wasn't as empty as it appeared. I started to hear things, small things at first. The scrape of furniture, the clink of glass, the soft shuffle of feet across the floor at night. At first, I thought it was just the house settling. But then it became clearer, footsteps pacing, coming from somewhere below. I tried to ignore it, chalking it up to my imagination or the house's strange acoustics. But one evening, after another long day of unpacking and cleaning, I found myself standing in the darkened hallway, listening to the faint sound of footsteps from below. The sounds were so subtle, so precise, almost like they were following the pattern of my movements upstairs. I couldn't help but wonder if I was hearing things, or if someone was moving around in the house with me. The kitchen was just down the hall, and the footsteps came from the basement. I knew the house had a basement, but I hadn't thought to explore it yet. I'd been avoiding that part of the house. The stairs to the basement were narrow, and the door was old, with a rusted, creaky handle. It always felt wrong. But tonight, something drove me to open it. I stood at the top of the stairs for a long moment, listening. The house was so silent, but below, the footsteps had stopped. The stillness was suffocating. I turned the handle, the rusty metal screeching like nails on a chalkboard. The door opened with a reluctant groan, revealing a narrow, steep staircase that descended into the shadows. A cold gust of air rushed up from below, smelling faintly of earth and something damp, something decayed. My heart pounded as I stepped closer, feeling the darkness press in around me. I couldn't explain it, but a sense of dread washed over me as I gazed down into the inky blackness. The light from the hallway barely illuminated the first few steps, and beyond that, it was impossible to see. I hesitated, fighting the urge to turn and run back upstairs. I could hear my pulse in my ears, feel the sweat pricking at the back of my neck. But I couldn't leave it like this. The house, the footsteps, the oppressive feeling of being watched. Something was happening, and I needed to know what it was. I reached for the light switch on the wall beside the stairs. But before my fingers could touch it, I froze. A sound, a soft scraping, came from below. It wasn't footsteps anymore, but a low, dragging sound. Something, or someone, was moving down there. My body tensed, and I wanted to scream, to run, but my feet felt like they were glued to the floor. The sound continued, closer now, like something dragging across the floorboards. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The air grew thick with tension, as though everything in the house was holding its breath. I swallowed hard, forcing my legs to move. With a shaky hand, I flipped the switch. The bare light bulb hanging from the ceiling flickered to life, casting a dim, yellowish glow across the basement steps. The air felt even colder now, and I could see my breath in front of me. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest as I descended the stairs, one step at a time. The basement was smaller than I had imagined, with low ceilings and thick beams crisscrossing above me. There were cobwebs in the corners, and the floor was covered in old newspapers, dust, and the remnants of forgotten years. But there was something else down here, something that caught my eye. A door. It was small, almost hidden in the far corner of the basement, partially covered by a stack of old boxes. The door looked old, like the rest of the house, but it was different, almost too new. The wood was darker, smoother, and the metal hinges were shiny, almost polished. The door itself didn't seem to belong here. It looked like it had been put in place recently. I didn't know why, but I knew I had to open it. I walked over to the door, my hands trembling as I reached for the handle. The handle was cold, icy to the touch. When I twisted it, it creaked in protest, but it opened easily, revealing a narrow passageway. The air in the passage was stifling, and as I stepped inside, I felt an overwhelming sense of unease. The walls were lined with old, crumbling bricks, and the floor was uneven, covered in dirt and debris. The passage stretched out into the darkness, the end of it hidden from sight. I could barely breathe. The air felt thick and stale, and as I stepped forward, I felt like something was watching me from the shadows. I told myself to turn back, but something compelled me to keep moving forward. And then, from the darkness ahead, I heard it again, the soft shuffle of footsteps. They were coming toward me, but there was no one there. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. I turned around to leave, but before I could move, the door slammed shut behind me with a deafening bang. The sound echoed in the passage, and I felt a surge of panic. I reached for the door, but it was locked. The cold metal handle wouldn't budge. And that's when I realized this was no ordinary basement. This was something else. Something older, darker, and far more dangerous. I should have turned back. I should have known better than to keep moving forward into that suffocating darkness. But curiosity had a hold on me, a grip that felt like it was choking the life out of me even as I stood frozen, staring at the locked door. I couldn't see it, but I felt the shadows pressing against me, a coldness seeping into my skin. The footsteps continued, slow, deliberate, dragging across the floor, coming closer and closer. My mind screamed at me to move, to run, but my body wouldn't respond. I couldn't pull my feet from the floor. The air felt thick, suffocating, and I could barely breathe. I reached out with one trembling hand to touch the door, my fingers slipping off the cold metal handle. The lock rattled, a sharp, metallic sound that seemed to echo through the narrow passageway. My pulse thudded in my ears. The footsteps stopped. In the silence that followed, I could hear my own ragged breathing. I turned around slowly, heart hammering, but there was nothing there. No one. Nothing. Just the darkness stretching out before me, endless and suffocating. The passage seemed to stretch on forever, and yet there was something in the very air that made it feel wrong. I took a step backward, my foot scraping against the rough floor. I could feel the weight of the darkness closing in on me, pressing against my chest like a physical force. I needed to get out. I needed to leave. But then there was another noise, a low creaking sound, as if something heavy was moving in the distance. I turned toward it, instinctively, even though every part of my body screamed to run the other way. And that's when I saw it, a faint light flickering in the distance. It wasn't much, just a weak glow, but it was enough to make my blood run cold. There was something down there, something that had been waiting for me. I took a step forward, my heart thudding in my chest as I strained my eyes to see. The light grew brighter as I crept down the passageway, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I didn't want to move forward, but I couldn't help it. Every step felt like it took me deeper into the pit of my own terror. The walls of the passage seemed to close in around me, the ceiling lowering, the air getting colder with every step. And then I saw it. At the end of the passage, just before the light, was a door. The door was small, but there was something about it that made it feel important. There was a shape etched into the wood, something twisted, something familiar. I couldn't quite make it out at first, but as I moved closer, the shapes began to form clearer. Faces. Dozens of faces, carved into the wood, staring out at me. Some of the faces were distorted, their eyes wide and hollow, their mouths frozen in screams. Some were familiar, others alien. I stepped closer, my breath catching in my throat. The faces were mine. I stumbled back, my hand shooting to my mouth to stifle the scream that threatened to escape. My heart was racing, my body trembling as I reached out to touch the door. The faces didn't move, but their eyes seemed to follow me. I couldn't take my eyes off them. They were all my face, but twisted, distorted, in ways I couldn't explain. It was like I was seeing reflections of myself, distorted versions of myself, all staring back at me. I pulled my hand away from the door, a cold sweat breaking out across my skin. What was this? Why were these faces carved into the door? Why were they all mine? I wanted to leave. I wanted to get out of there. But I couldn't stop myself from reaching for the door again. The pull, the curiosity, it was too strong. My fingers brushed against the wood, the carvings smooth beneath my touch. The door opened. It didn't creak or groan, it just opened. The light that had been flickering outside spilled in, casting long shadows across the small room beyond the door. I stepped through, my body aching with the need to leave, to run, but my feet didn't obey. They carried me into the room as if they had a mind of their own. I wish they hadn't. The room was small, barely bigger than a closet, but what it held made my stomach churn. The walls were covered in photographs, thousands of them. All of them were of me. Pictures of my face, my expression, some from when I was a child, others more recent. There were no dates, no names, just photographs, my photographs. But there was something off about them. The faces in the photos weren't exactly mine. They were twisted. They were distorted versions of myself, frozen in moments of terror, horror, pain. Each photo captured me at my worst, my face contorted in fear, my eyes wide with terror, my mouth frozen in a scream. I felt my legs give out beneath me, my body crashing to the floor as I stared in disbelief at the wall of faces. How could this be? Who had taken these pictures? Who had done this? The air in the room felt thick, suffocating, as if the very walls were closing in on me. The silence was deafening, but the sound of my heartbeat thudded in my ears, louder and louder. I reached for one of the photos, my hands trembling. It was a picture of me from just a few months ago, taken in the very house I had moved into. But it wasn't just any picture. It was a picture of me standing in the hallway, staring out of the window. But I didn't take that photo. No one had been there with me. I set the photo back on the floor, my mind spinning. The room felt colder now, the light flickering even more violently, as if it were about to burn out. I scanned the room frantically, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. There were more pictures, more faces. They covered the walls, floor, even the ceiling. My face, twisted in every way possible, staring back at me from all angles. I stumbled backward, trying to escape, but as I moved, something caught my eye. A mirror. It was positioned in the far corner of the room, leaning against the wall, its surface covered in dust. I didn't want to look into it. I didn't want to see anything else. But the pull of the mirror was too strong. I couldn't stop myself. I turned toward it, and that's when I saw him. Mr. Luther. His face was in the mirror, his eyes wide and cold, watching me. But the reflection wasn't just of him. It was of me too. It was me, standing in the corner of the room, staring back at myself. But I wasn't standing there. I was moving. The reflection of me was slowly walking toward Mr. Luther. The version of me in the mirror raised its hand, reaching out for him, but I wasn't controlling it. I tried to scream, to move, but my body wouldn't obey. The reflection in the mirror wasn't me anymore. It was something else, something that had control over my every move. My heart stopped, and then I heard his voice. It was soft, a whisper in the back of my mind. You should never have come here. The whisper in the back of my mind echoed over and over, drowning out everything else. You should never have come here. It wasn't just Mr. Luther's voice. It was everywhere. It was in the walls, in the air, in the very fibers of the house itself. It reverberated through my head like a pulse, a steady beat that I couldn't shake. I couldn't look away from the mirror. Something about it held me captive, made it impossible to turn around, to leave, even though every part of me screamed to run. The reflection in the glass wasn't me. At least, it wasn't the me I knew. I could see myself moving in the reflection, but it wasn't my body that was in control. It was as though something else was using it as a puppet, guiding me toward Mr. Luther. The version of me in the mirror took a step toward him. My heart slammed against my ribcage as I tried to scream, to push myself forward, but my body was frozen, locked in place. I could feel every muscle tense, every nerve on fire, but I couldn't control a single movement. I wasn't moving of my own accord. My reflection was doing it for me. The reflection reached out its hand, its fingers long and cold, just inches away from Mr. Luther's. His eyes didn't leave mine, not the real me, but the one in the mirror. There was something wrong about those eyes. The reflection of me had no soul. It was hollow. The hollow emptiness of it sent a wave of dread so deep that I felt like I was sinking into the ground. You shouldn't have come here, Mr. Luther repeated, his voice slithering through the space between us. This house was never meant for you. His words were sharp, cruel, and they echoed in my mind, bouncing off the walls of the small room. The more he spoke, the more my own voice seemed to fade away, replaced by an overwhelming silence that pressed against me. It was suffocating. My mind spun, trying to process everything. This house wasn't mine. It never had been. And then I understood. The house was never mine to begin with. It had always been his. He had claimed it long before I ever set foot in it. His presence, his eyes, they had always been watching, lurking in the shadows, waiting for me to step into his web. The house, the strange photographs, the mirrors, all of it was a trap meant for me. You were always meant to come, Mr. Luther said, his smile creeping into his voice. I've been waiting, watching, for years. The reflection of me in the mirror took another step forward, reaching out its hand toward the real Mr. Luther. who had not moved an inch. And yet, despite the reflection's movement, Mr. Luther's cold, dead eyes remained locked on me. Not the me in the mirror, the real me. My reflection's hand met his. The moment they touched, I felt it, a sharp, stabbing pain in my chest, as if something had pierced me from the inside. I gasped for air, my breath coming out in ragged sobs, but the pain only worsened. It spread, crawling down my limbs, making my fingers twitch uncontrollably. And then it hit me, the mirror. The mirror was the key. The reflection, the pain, the twisting feeling in my chest, it was all connected to the mirror. The reflection wasn't me anymore. It was something else, something that had taken my place, taken my body, and was using it to feed on me. I tore my eyes away from the mirror, forcing my head to turn. The room had grown colder, impossibly so. The light was flickering in and out, casting long, twisted shadows across the walls. I looked at the door, the small one I had walked through just moments ago. It was still there, but somehow it seemed farther away, more distant, as if the space between me and the exit had grown longer. I tried to move. My legs felt like they were made of lead, but still, I tried to force my body forward. The sharp pain in my chest kept me from getting far. It felt like my ribs were slowly cracking under pressure, squeezing the air out of me. Why? I managed to croak, my voice barely audible, as I struggled to stay conscious. Why me? What do you want? Mr. Luther's smile grew wider, stretching across his face, but it was devoid of any warmth. It was cold, malicious. You're a part of this house now, he said, stepping closer. You always have been. You just didn't know it until now. His words didn't make sense. How could I be a part of the house? This was my house, my home, the one place I'd moved to for a fresh start. I had no ties to it, no connections to it, except for the memories of the things I had unpacked into it. This was my life. But his words echoed in my mind, growing louder. The house wasn't mine. It wasn't meant to be. It never had been. The pain in my chest intensified, and I screamed. I screamed until my voice cracked, but no sound escaped my lips. The room had become so cold that I could feel the ice forming on my skin. A cold hand gripped my shoulder. I spun around in horror, expecting to see Mr. Luther standing behind me. But there was no one there. Instead, I saw a face that made my blood run cold. It was mine, but it wasn't me. It was the same twisted, hollow-eyed version of myself from the photographs. My reflection, but not in the mirror this time. This face was standing right behind me, inches from my neck. I could see the pale skin, the hollow eyes, and that cold smile that was now carved into the face of someone who was wearing my skin. You belong to this house now, the reflection whispered, its voice the same as Mr. Luther's, but distorted, broken. We've been waiting. The house has been waiting. And now you're here. I stumbled back, my legs collapsing beneath me as the figure reached out, its fingers brushing against my arm. The cold seared through my skin, and I screamed again, but no sound escaped. I tried to pull away, but the hand tightened its grip, and the world around me seemed to close in. The walls of the room constricted, squeezing the very life out of me. You can't leave, the reflection said, its voice so familiar now, so intimate, that it felt like my own voice speaking back to me. You've already taken your place in this house. You're a part of it now, and it will never let you go. The house that I thought I owned, that I thought I could control. But I had always been a part of it. The mirror, the photographs, the twisted versions of me, it was all part of something darker, something older, something that had waited for years patiently for me to finally walk in. The footsteps echoed again, closer, faster now, coming from the hallway, from the very walls themselves. It was like the house itself was alive, breathing, moving, and it was pulling me in. Mr. Luther was standing at the door, watching me. His cold eyes never left mine, and that twisted smile curled at the edges of his lips. "You've come home," he whispered, and I realized too late that I never left. The pain in my chest, sharp and unyielding, seemed to grow worse with every passing second. I was no longer sure where the pain ended and where the darkness began. The walls of the room pressed in on me like a vice, suffocating me in an embrace that felt far too real. The air was cold, and yet my skin burned as if I were on fire, the feeling like 1,000 needles were pricking every inch of me at once. I looked around frantically, trying to regain some sense of control, some semblance of escape. But every direction I turned, there was nothing but darkness and the overwhelming presence of him. Mr. Luther's eyes, those cold, empty eyes, never left me. His smile twisted with cruelty as he watched me struggle. "You shouldn't have opened the door," Mr. Luther's voice echoed, low and taunting. "But then again, you had no choice, did you?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to fight back. But my body refused to cooperate, and the crushing weight of the house bore down on me. It was like it was alive, feeding off my terror, wrapping around me, tightening its hold with every breath. The photographs on the walls, my twisted face staring back at me, seemed to move, to shift, growing more distorted with each blink of my eyes. The figures in the frames, they weren't just staring anymore. They were watching me, like sentinels, like they knew what would happen next. "You'll never leave, Kevin," Mr. Luther continued. "Not now. Not ever." The words hit me like a physical blow. I had thought I understood the situation, but I didn't. I still didn't. What was happening to me? What was happening to this place? The house was becoming something more, something darker, and I was at its mercy. With a final, mocking glance, Mr. Luther turned and walked out of the room. His footsteps faded into the distance, swallowed by the ever-deepening silence of the house. And for the first time in what felt like hours, I was alone. Alone with my fear, with the terror that had gripped my soul from the moment I stepped inside this cursed place. But the silence was deceptive. It was the kind of silence that you know won't last. It's the kind of silence that always precedes something worse, something far more horrifying. I struggled to stand, my legs trembling beneath me, my knees threatening to give way with each step. The reflection, the hollow-eyed version of myself, was gone now. But the memories of it, the way it had moved on its own, still lingered in my mind like a nightmare that wouldn't let go. The way it had looked at me, how its eyes hadn't been mine. I turned toward the mirror again, but it was empty now. There was no reflection, no twisted version of myself staring back at me. Just a blank, cold surface. But I knew the mirror was far from done with me. I could feel it, feel its influence like a heavy weight in the back of my mind. I had to leave. I couldn't stay in this house anymore. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to get out, to run, to find a way out before it consumed me completely. But where would I go? The house was me. Every corner of it felt like it had wrapped itself around me, as though it had always known I'd be here. As I stood there, shivering in the stillness, a noise reached my ears, a faint scraping sound, as though something was moving beneath the floorboards. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the house settling. This was something else. The scraping grew louder, closer, like something was trying to break free from beneath the floor. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't want to investigate. I didn't want to know what was down there. But something deep inside me, the same thing that had led me to this nightmare in the first place, urged me to move closer. I stepped cautiously toward the corner of the room, where the floorboards appeared to be shifting, as though something was trapped beneath them. My heart pounded in my chest. This was it, the next layer of this horrible mystery. I could feel it. I could feel the house waiting, watching, anticipating what would happen next. There, in the farthest corner of the room, I saw it. A loose floorboard. It wasn't much, just a sliver of wood, but it was enough. Enough to make my skin crawl, enough to make the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. With shaking hands, I crouched down and pried at the edge of the board. The scraping noise intensified, as though whatever was beneath the floor had sensed my movement. My fingers dug into the wood, desperate to expose whatever was hiding down there, even though every fiber of my being told me not to. Finally, with a sickening crack, the board lifted free. Beneath it was a narrow, dark gap, and something was breathing from within. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breath. I had to look. I couldn't stop now. I lowered my hand into the gap, my fingers brushing against the cold, damp wood. Something inside the space shifted, and I jerked my hand back instinctively, but it was too late. A long, twisted hand shot out from beneath the floor and grabbed my wrist. I screamed, but no sound came out. The pressure on my wrist was like ice, freezing me in place. The fingers were long, unnaturally so, and I could feel the coldness of them burning through my skin. The hand pulled harder, dragging me toward the hole beneath the floor, and I tried to fight it. I tried to pull away, but the strength of whatever had me was overwhelming. My feet slipped on the floorboards as I struggled, my legs kicking, but there was no escape. The more I fought, the stronger the grip became, until I felt like my wrist would snap under the pressure. And then I saw it. Two glowing eyes, staring up at me from beneath the floor, flickering in the dark like the remnants of some long-forgotten nightmare. A face, half human, half something else, emerged from the shadows beneath the floor. It had no mouth, just hollowed-out skin where the features should have been, but its eyes, those glowing eyes, were enough to paralyze me with terror. It was Mr. Luther's face. But it wasn't his face, not entirely. The eyes were wrong, too wrong. They were empty, hollow, but they held something else. Something ancient. Something evil. It was like the face of a man who had died, but whose spirit had never truly left. It was like looking at the house itself, a reflection of everything that was wrong, everything that had been twisted and torn apart. I wanted to pull away, but the fingers had a death grip on me. The eyes in the darkness grew larger as the face moved closer, pulling itself from the shadows. I realized that the creature was dragging itself up from the depths of the house, the very heart of the house, the place where it had been waiting, biding its time, waiting for me. I struggled harder, my wrist burning, as if the very essence of my life was being siphoned away, but nothing I did had any effect. The creature's cold, lifeless hands twisted harder, pulling me closer to its gaping maw. And then I heard it again, the whisper. "You can't leave." The voice was all around me now. It was no longer just Mr. Luther's voice. It was the house, the floor, the walls, the air itself. It had all merged into one, a single entity, and it was laughing at me. I was trapped. The creature's face came into focus, and I realized with a sickening horror that I recognized it. It was me, but it wasn't just me. It was every version of me, the twisted, hollowed-out versions from the photographs. It had been waiting for me to come home, to return, and now it was too late to escape. There, in the farthest corner of the room, I saw it. A loose floorboard. It wasn't much, just a sliver of wood, but it was enough. Enough to make my skin crawl, enough to make the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. With shaking hands, I crouched down and pried at the edge of the board. The scraping noise intensified, as though whatever was beneath the floor had sensed my movement. My fingers dug into the wood, desperate to expose whatever was hiding down there, even though every fiber of my being told me not to. Finally, with a sickening crack, the board lifted free. Beneath it was a narrow, dark gap, and something was breathing from within. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breath. I had to look. I couldn't stop now. I lowered my hand into the gap, my fingers brushing against the cold, damp wood. Something inside the space shifted, and I jerked my hand back instinctively, but it was too late. A long, twisted hand shot out from beneath the floor and grabbed my wrist. I screamed, but no sound came out. The pressure on my wrist was like ice, freezing me in place. The fingers were long, unnaturally so, and I could feel the coldness of them burning through my skin. The hand pulled harder, dragging me toward the hole beneath the floor, and I tried to fight it. I tried to pull away, but the strength of whatever had me was overwhelming. My feet slipped on the floorboards as I struggled, my legs kicking, but there was no escape. The more I fought, the stronger the grip became, until I felt like my wrist would snap under the pressure. And then I saw it. Two glowing eyes, staring up at me from beneath the floor, flickering in the dark like the remnants of some long-forgotten nightmare. A face, half human, half something else, emerged from the shadows beneath the floor. It had no mouth, just hollowed-out skin where the features should have been, but its eyes, those glowing eyes, were enough to paralyze me with terror. It was Mr. Luther's face. But it wasn't his face, not entirely. The eyes were wrong, too wrong. They were empty, hollow, but they held something else. Something ancient. Something evil. It was like the face of a man who had died, but whose spirit had never truly left. It was like looking at the house itself, a reflection of everything that was wrong, everything that had been twisted and torn apart. I wanted to pull away, but the fingers had a death grip on me. The eyes in the darkness grew larger as the face moved closer, pulling itself from the shadows. I realized that the creature was dragging itself up from the depths of the house, the very heart of the house, the place where it had been waiting, biding its time, waiting for me. I struggled harder, my wrist burning, as if the very essence of my life was being siphoned away, but nothing I did had any effect. The creature's cold, lifeless hands twisted harder, pulling me closer to its gaping maw. And then I heard it again, the whisper. "You can't leave." The voice was all around me now. It was no longer just Mr. Luther's voice. It was the house, the floor, the walls, the air itself. It had all merged into one, a single entity, and it was laughing at me. I was trapped. The creature's face came into focus, and I realized with a sickening horror that I recognized it. It was me, but it wasn't just me. It was every version of me, the twisted, hollowed-out versions from the photographs. It had been waiting for me to come home, to return, and now it was too late to escape. The creature's eyes were wide and glowing, staring directly into mine with an intensity that made my stomach churn. It was like it could see through me, past the surface, down to the very core of who I was. The air around me grew heavier, thicker, and I could feel its cold, wet breath on my face as it inched closer, dragging itself up from beneath the floor. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped my lips. The house had swallowed my voice, just as it had swallowed every other part of me. I couldn't fight it anymore. My body was locked in place, as if the house itself had shackled me, forcing me to witness whatever nightmare was unfolding before me. The creature's twisted face, the face that was somehow mine, hovered just inches from my own. I could see the hollow, sunken cheeks, the vacant stare, The thin, jagged skin stretched tight over the skull, and I felt my heart clench in terror. This was no hallucination. This wasn't just some figment of my imagination. This thing was real. I tried to pull away, but my feet felt like they were glued to the floor. The more I struggled, the more it felt like the walls of the room were closing in on me, shrinking tighter with each breath. The shadows seemed to stretch, contorting around me, becoming something tangible, something alive. The floor beneath me groaned as if it were awakening, as if it were preparing to devour me whole. "You're not leaving," the creature whispered, its voice hoarse and rasping, but unmistakably familiar. It was the voice of me, but twisted, warped, by whatever evil had claimed this place. I tried to scream again, but it was no use. My throat was raw, and my mouth felt dry, like all the moisture had been drained from it. I could feel the creature's fingers, my fingers, brush against my skin, and every touch was like fire, like ice. It wasn't just a physical sensation. It felt like it was sinking into my soul, tearing me apart from the inside out. With a sudden jolt, the creature's fingers dug into my skin, pulling me forward, and my heart skipped a beat. I could see its face more clearly now. The hollow eyes, the jagged smile that stretched impossibly wide, the way its skin seemed to ripple and shift like it wasn't even human anymore. The thing that was me, it wasn't just a reflection. It was something ancient, something hungry, something that had been waiting in the dark corners of the house for far too long. The house was alive. It wasn't just a building. It wasn't just walls and wooden nails. It was something else, something sentient, something that had been built on a foundation of decay and darkness. And I was part of it. I was never meant to leave. "You think you can escape?" The creature's voice echoed in my mind, its words piercing through the fog of fear that clouded my thoughts. "This house is yours. It owns you, and it will never let you go." I felt the pull of the creature grow stronger, dragging me closer to its gaping mouth. It was as if my very life force was being siphoned out, drained into the walls of the house itself. I could feel the floor beneath me shift again, groaning under the weight of something massive, something dark. The house was hungry, and it had waited so long for me to come, for me to belong to it. As my mind raced to comprehend the horror of what was happening, a single thought cut through the chaos. The photographs, the faces that had been staring at me from every corner of the house. The ones that looked like me, but not quite. The ones that were twisted and hollow, staring with lifeless eyes. They were all connected to this place. They were me, every version of me. The reflections, the faces in the photos, they were my past, my soul, my very essence. And the house had been feeding on it. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The house didn't just want to trap me. It wanted to consume me, to feed off my very identity, my very existence. It wasn't just the creature beneath the floor. It was the house itself, its walls, its floors, its foundation. It had been using me all along, just as it had used every version of me that had come before. The house was a parasite, feeding on the souls of those who had stepped inside, taking their lives, their memories, their very selves, and leaving only hollow shells behind. I was just another piece of the puzzle. "You don't belong out there," the creature hissed, its breath like a cold wind in my ear. "This is where you belong. This is where you've always belonged." I couldn't breathe. My chest was tight. My heart was hammering in my ears. I had to get out. I couldn't stay here. I wouldn't let this place win. I couldn't be another face in a photo, another hollow-eyed version of myself that had been consumed by this cursed house. But the more I thought, the more I realized just how impossible it was. The walls seemed to stretch, expanding, warping around me, as if they were closing in on me. The house had become too real, too powerful. It was pulling me in slowly but surely, and the more I fought, the more I became a part of it. My mind spun as I tried to make sense of it all. The mirror, the creature, Mr. Luther, the photographs. The house had been waiting for me all this time, and now I was trapped inside it. It had taken everything from me. My identity, my life. It had been siphoning it off, one piece at a time, until all that was left was a shell, a hollow shell. But then, something shifted inside me. Something deep down, beneath all the fear and the terror, sparked. A flicker of defiance. A voice. I wasn't going to let the house win. I wasn't going to be consumed by it. There had to be a way out. There had to be a way to break free. The creature in front of me continued to leer, its twisted version of my face grinning at me as though it could sense the shift in my resolve. It tried to pull me closer, to drag me into its gaping maw, but I fought back. I fought with everything I had left, summoning the last of my strength. I jerked my wrist free from its grip, the movement slow at first, but with each pull, I felt something begin to give way. I couldn't think. I couldn't plan. I had no idea what I was doing, but my instincts took over, driving me to push through the overwhelming horror. I grabbed the loose floorboard with trembling hands, the sharp edges digging into my fingers as I pried it free. It was the only way to fight back. I had to do it. I had to destroy the heart of this place, to stop it from feeding on me. The creature screeched in fury, but I didn't stop. And then, for the first time since I had stepped into this cursed house, I felt the walls of the room tremble. The house was afraid, but it was too late. I was no longer going to be its victim. The moment I ripped the floorboard away, I knew I was crossing a line that I couldn't uncross. The wood splintered in my hands, and as the sharp edges scraped against my palms, I felt something deeper. The house seemed to shift beneath me, as if it were reacting to my actions. The creaking of the floorboards was louder than ever before, and the sound that followed, the shrill, haunting whisper of something that wasn't quite human, sent an icy chill down my spine. "You can't escape," it said, though I knew it wasn't spoken aloud. It came from everywhere and nowhere, whispering through the walls, seeping into the cracks of my mind. I wasn't just hearing it. I was feeling it. My breath caught in my throat as I quickly scrambled away from the gaping hole I'd uncovered in the floor. The darkness down there was absolute. The hole wasn't deep, barely a few feet, but the blackness that radiated from it felt as though it reached into another dimension, into something far worse than any earthly nightmare. The air around it was heavy, almost thick, like it had been festering for years. Behind me, I heard a low, guttural growl. The creature was coming, its claws scraping along the floorboards, its rasping breath echoing in the silence of the room. I didn't turn around to look. I couldn't afford to. Instead, I pushed myself further into the hole beneath the floor, dragging my body forward. My heart thumped in my chest, the beats so heavy I could barely hear the world around me. The creature was coming. The walls were moving. The air was thickening. I had to get away. I knew I couldn't stay in this room. I knew I couldn't stay anywhere in this cursed house. But as my hands slid down the rough edges of the hole, and my fingers gripped the slippery floor beneath me, a dreadful realization washed over me like a cold wave. It was the house that had been swallowing me whole, piece by piece. The house that had consumed me before I'd even realized what was happening. And now it was closing in on me. I was running out of time. The hole opened into a narrow tunnel, dark and suffocating. I wasn't sure what I expected, another room, another basement, but the only thing ahead was darkness. The further I crawled, the more the oppressive atmosphere seemed to press down on me. I could feel the house around me, its very foundation shifting and groaning. It was as if the structure of the building itself was alive, reacting to my every movement. I pushed forward, my breathing ragged, as I squeezed my body through the narrow passageway. My hands scraped against the walls, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't think. I couldn't pause for even a second. If I stopped moving, I might never move again. The house would trap me in its bowels, like it had trapped so many before. I could hear the whispers now, voices, but not human. Hollow, distorted voices. Faces in frames. And the creature, that thing that had once been my reflection, it was getting closer. I could feel its presence behind me, hot breath on my neck. It was gaining on me. My hands were raw from scraping against the walls, my knees bruised from crawling through the tight space. I didn't know how long the tunnel was, but I couldn't let myself think about it. I couldn't let myself think about the fact that there might be no way out, that this tunnel might lead nowhere, that the house might have already won. But the further I crawled, the more I could feel something shifting in the darkness. The air around me seemed to hum with an unnatural energy. And then I saw it, a faint glow, far ahead but unmistakable, a light. I pushed forward, urgency now guiding every movement, though my body screamed for rest. The light was small, almost like a distant star, but it was there, and it felt real. It felt like it was leading me out. The tunnel seemed endless. My body ached, every muscle protesting the effort, but the light kept me going. The farther I crawled, the more it grew, shining brighter with each passing moment. I didn't dare stop. But then, the sound behind me intensified. I could hear the creature's claws scraping against the floor, the desperate, pained wheeze of its breath. The growl. It was getting closer, too close. It wasn't far behind now. I could feel its rancid breath, hot on my back. I twisted my body, my stomach turning, desperate to push myself through faster. My hands were shaking now, slick with sweat and grime, but I kept moving, focusing only on the light ahead. The walls of the tunnel began to narrow even more, squeezing in, forcing me to crawl through an increasingly tight space. I felt my chest constrict as I fought to breathe, but I couldn't stop. Not now. The creature was so close, its claws now scratching at my feet. My heart raced, my mind unable to think past the primal instinct to survive. My pulse thrummed in my ears, louder than my ragged breaths. The darkness seemed to close in from all sides as I pushed forward, just a little farther. The light was brighter now, so close, just beyond the bend. But the walls were getting tighter, and the air was so thick that it felt like I couldn't breathe. I have to get there. The tunnel felt endless, and the walls seemed to be closing in. My body screamed with exhaustion, but there was no stopping. The creature behind me was gaining, its breath a rasping, wet sound that filled the tunnel. I could feel its presence behind me now, so close. It was only inches away, its twisted, deformed body crawling behind me. I gritted my teeth, pushing forward, trying to ignore the claustrophobia clawing at my throat. I couldn't let it win. Then, with one last burst of strength, I threw myself forward, my hand shooting out to grasp whatever was on the other side of the tunnel. The wall. The light. The moment I felt my fingers make contact with solid ground, I pushed with everything I had. The light was blinding, and I could feel myself breaking through, into something new, something different. The air around me felt different, fresher, cleaner. I pulled myself into the light, gasping, scrambling to get through the narrow opening. And that's when I saw it. I wasn't in the house anymore. I didn't know where I was, but it was outside. I was outside, in the cold night air. But something was wrong. I could feel the house still, like a weight pressing against my chest, like a shadow looming over me. The creature's voice echoed in my mind. You can never leave. But I was outside. The house was gone. I had escaped. Hadn't I? I looked around, trying to steady my breath, my thoughts racing. There was nothing familiar here. No streetlights. No houses. Just a field. An endless expanse of tall, swaying grass under a starless sky. The house was gone, but I wasn't free. I could still hear it. The whispers, the scratching, the growl of something hunting me from the shadows. I was outside, but I wasn't free. The cold air stung my face, but it wasn't the fresh, crisp air I expected. There was something thick and oppressive about it, like the air had been soaked in the same darkness that had followed me through the walls of the house. I stood there in that vast open field, feeling as if the very earth beneath me was mocking me. It was like I had walked into a painting, a world that wasn't real, a world that couldn't exist. The grass, the sky, the horizon, they were all wrong. Too still, too quiet. I felt like an intruder in this place, like I had wandered somewhere I wasn't meant to be. The house, though it was no longer visible, lingered in my mind, like a shadow pressing down on my chest. The whispers were louder now, filling my head with their suffocating presence. The creature's breath, hot and putrid, was still fresh in my memory, and somewhere in the distance, I could still hear its guttural growl, like a distant thunderstorm, always there, always waiting. I was outside. I had escaped. But had I really? I glanced around again, looking for any sign of civilization, any familiar landmark that would tell me where I was. But there was nothing. Just a barren, unending field of tall, bending grass. The sky above was impossibly dark, as if the stars themselves had been erased from existence. There was no moon, no clouds, no light, just pure, suffocating darkness that stretched far beyond where I could see. Panic clawed at my throat. I wanted to scream, to shout for help, but the words wouldn't come. It was as if the air itself had stolen my voice. I was alone. Alone in a place that shouldn't exist, a place that was both outside the house and yet somehow inside it, all at once. And then I heard it again. The voice, the whisper. But this time, it wasn't a whisper. You can never leave, Kevin. The voice came from behind me, soft at first, like a breath on the back of my neck. But I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. The creature. The thing that had haunted me from the moment I'd entered the house. The twisted reflection of myself, the nightmare that had lurked in the mirrors and photographs. It was still here, still hunting me. I turned slowly, my eyes scanning the darkness, searching for the source of the voice. But all I saw was the same endless field of tall grass and the same dark sky. There was nothing, nothing at all. Kevin, the voice said again, closer this time. It was no longer just a whisper. It was a low, guttural growl, coming from somewhere deep within the earth itself. The air around me grew colder, and I could feel the ground beneath my feet shift, as if the earth itself was alive, twisting and pulling at me. No, this can't be happening. It's not real. I tried to run. I turned, desperate to escape the voice, desperate to get away from whatever nightmare was closing in on me. But as I took a step forward, the ground beneath my feet buckled. The grass parted, revealing a deep, gaping hole, dark and inviting. The same blackness I had seen when I first ripped away the floorboard in the house. I stumbled backward, my heart racing in my chest. My legs felt weak, like the ground itself was pulling me down. The hole grew wider, its edges curling inward, as though it was pulling in everything around it. The whispers grew louder, filling the air, drowning out everything else. You can never leave. The voice was stronger now, no longer a whisper but a chant, an endless, repeating mantra. I turned and tried to run again, but the world around me shifted. The horizon warped, and the field of grass seemed to close in on me, bending and twisting until I felt like I was trapped in a maze of endless corridors, all leading back to that one gaping hole. The creature was still behind me, moving in the shadows, always just out of sight. I could hear its ragged breathing, its claws scratching against the ground, its presence like a storm waiting to break. What is this? What is happening to me? My mind was racing, thoughts colliding with each other, trying to make sense of it all. But nothing made sense. The house, the creature, the photographs. It was all connected. The house had been alive. Its walls were a living thing, its floors pulsing with the energy of something ancient. The photographs, the faces that had been trapped within them. I had seen them, in every room, their eyes watching me, their expressions twisted in some eternal agony. They had all been trapped, just like I was being trapped now. I had thought I had escaped the house, but I hadn't. The house had been inside me the whole time. I was never free. The whispering voice came again, louder now, and it wasn't just one voice anymore. It was dozens, hundreds of voices, all speaking in unison, chanting my name. My hands trembled as I reached up to cover my ears, but the voices weren't just in my head. They were everywhere. In the grass, in the air, in the very ground beneath my feet. Kevin, Kevin, Kevin. And then I realized, with a sickening lurch in my stomach, what was happening. This place wasn't real. It was just another layer of the house, another part of the nightmare. A place where I had been trapped, where time and space had no meaning. I had walked into the house and thought I had escaped, but I hadn't. The house was inside me. I looked down at my hands, and for the first time, I saw what had happened to me. My fingers were no longer my own. They had twisted, grown long and thin like claws. My skin was pale, sickly, and wrinkled, like something that had been left to rot for years. I looked up again, and in the distance, I saw a figure moving toward me. A shadow, blacker than the night, its form flickering and shifting like smoke. It was the creature, the thing that had been hunting me from the start. But it wasn't just the creature now. It was me. The creature was no longer just a twisted reflection of myself. It was me. It was the version of me that the house had molded, the version that had been twisted and trapped in the photographs. The creature was the result of everything I had lost, everything I had become in the house. And now, it was closing in on me, ready to drag me back into the darkness. The hole in the ground grew wider, its edges now sharp and jagged, like the teeth of some monstrous beast. The creature reached out a hand toward me, its claws scraping the air. "You belong to the house, Kevin," it growled, its voice thick with hunger. "We all belong." I felt my heart stop as the creature lunged toward me, and I was thrown into the pit, falling into the abyss. As I fell, I realized something that made my blood run cold. There was no escape. I had been consumed by the house, and now there was nothing left of me. No face, no voice, no body, just a memory trapped in a photograph, staring out from the walls, waiting for the next victim to walk through the door. And that was the end. As the darkness fades and you drift into the quiet of your own thoughts, remember that not all fears are real, and not every shadow has a monster hiding within it. The world around us can feel overwhelming sometimes, but with each breath, you can release the tension and find peace in the calm. Take a moment to listen to the sounds of the night with a soft rhythm of your breath. Let the quiet embrace you, and allow your mind to settle, free from the horrors of the day. The house we just left behind is no more than a tale a story to ignite curiosity and wonder. But now it's time to let it go. Close your eyes and think of something warm, something that brings you comfort. Whether it's a place you love, a memory that makes you smile, or the feeling of being safe in your own space. The world is vast, and there are endless wonders awaiting you. So rest easy knowing tomorrow brings a fresh start. As you slip deeper into your slumber, remember to take a moment in the morning to reflect on the beauty around you. What new adventures will you discover? What dreams will you chase? The night is over, but the journey doesn't stop here. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, or if you've ever wondered what it's like to step into the unknown, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts or any of your own eerie encounters. Let's keep the conversation going. Sweet dreams, and don't forget, the stories we tell shape the dreams we have.